Hey there, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Caleb, and today what we're going to do is go through and forge a Skinner style EDC knife out of 1084 1.5" stock. The first thing we're going to do is go through and bring down the width of the stock down from 1.5" inch down to about a little over an inch. Once we got our stock width where we want it, I'm going to go through and I'm going to start forging in the tip. 1/8 inch stock is a little bit harder to forge, especially for me. I'm very much a beginner, but it is doable if you just take your time and make sure you dress the sides as you're hammering the tip in. I probably could have done a little bit better job with that, but it didn't take 1 or 2 heats to get the tip where I wanted it. All right, so once the tip's in, I'm going through and I'm going to start bringing out the edge of the bevel, kind of where the choil is. Probably what I would have done had I thought about it is actually I would have isolated the blade first and then pulled the choil out. But instead I did the choil first and isolated the blade. It worked out fine, but I did have to keep going back and redressing it. Next time I probably will just isolate it, get that isolation good, and set, and then go back and start bringing out the bevel and the edge of the choil just to make sure it's a little bit more dressed and less time cleaning up mistakes and things like that. So now I'm going to start isolating the blade, and you can see where I have to keep going back and dressing the choil. Like I say, it worked out fine, but I do think I kind of wasted a few heats just getting everything where it ended up needing to be. Slowly but surely, the tang is starting to thin out and kind of get to where it needs to be. This is going to be just over the length of 3 fingers, so probably 6 to 6.5, maybe 7 inches total overall. So at this point, it's just taking a few heats and working that tang down. Right here, I'm starting the bevels. I start to slowly kind of hammer out the bevels. There is my plan is to do no grinding on the bevels pre-heat treat. I want to get it down, forged down to as close to shape as I can. And I think I accomplished that. It went into the heat treat with no bevels ground on it, and the blade width probably just under 1/8 of an inch, probably maybe closer to about a 3/32. A little on the thin side, but it did come out fairly well, no warps. Once I get it cut off, I can go through and start dressing that tang up a little bit more, get it drawn out slightly, and get the corners rounded in, and kind of get the curvature that it needs. It's always important to keep dressing those sides the more you hammer in one direction, the steel likes to go out in another. And keeping that tidy is pretty important. There's less work you have to do later fixing mistakes that you could have fixed as you were hammering them out. And I dropped it. Here I keep going back and trying to make sure the blade has a uniform thickness. The lighting in my shop isn't that great, especially at night. I have the one fluorescent light and a few little isolated lights like on my grinder and my drill press. So where I'm standing, the light's actually behind me and I don't have a whole lot of light, so it's hard for me to kind of see what I'm doing. I'm going to try to address that in the future, but all I'm doing now is going through and trying to make sure that the blade has a uniform thickness and that it's straight and in the center. Keep going back and forth and dressing the tang versus the blade. Here's the final rough forged blade. Now what we're going to do is take it over to the grinder and get the profile worked out. Really all I did was take the majority of the hump off the back of the spine down and kind of clean that swoop up. I straightened the back of the tang up and flattened that out and made it look a little bit nicer. And on the cutting edge, I did straighten that up quite a bit as far as just making sure that there was no forge marks in the actual profile of the knife. Not pictured, I did actually take it on the small wheels and clean up the underside of the tang. I forgot to hit record on that, so I do apologize. But here we are, punching the holes, or I'm sorry, punching the marks for the pin holes. It's gonna be a 1/4 inch lanyard hole in the back and an 1/8 inch pin in the front. Drilling holes, I always do recommend trying to clamp these things down some form or fashion. These things can helicopter on you and cut you pretty bad. I was using fresh, brand new drill bits, and they were cutting very well, so I didn't bother with it this time. But I normally do that, just mainly because I've had these things spin out of control and either crack knives or cut me or go flying across the room, and it's just no fun for anybody. Something to remember when you're drilling holes: take your time. Don't try to force that and make it go any faster than it needs to. You'll ruin bits, and you'll actually work hard on the steel and make it near impossible to get a drill bit through. So just take your time, keep it oiled, try to keep it cool, and it should go through. So after the holes were drilled, I did 3 normalization cycles on it and then quenched it in Park 50. After everything was quenched, cleaned off, and cooled down slightly to where I could touch it, it was tempered 2 times at 400 degrees in my oven. This pretty much wraps it up for part 1 of this hand-forged Skinner. Please take a second to like and subscribe to my channel and be ready for part 2 when it comes out, probably in the next few days. Thanks, guys.